Saturday nights at our house always had that same cozy pulse, the scent of rosemary chicken drifting through the kitchen, the sound of laughter colliding with the clinking of wine glasses, and the warm glow of the chandelier bathing everything in gold. It felt safe, predictable, almost comforting. Ethan, my brother-in-law, was in his usual form, cracking jokes that made everyone roar. Sophie, his wife, smiled that perfect smile of hers, the one that could charm a storm into silence. And Mark, my Mark, looked just as content as any husband surrounded by family should. But that night, something in the air felt slightly off, like a note played out of tune in a song I'd heard 1,000 times. Between the jokes and the refills of Merlot, I started catching glances between Mark and Sophie, quick, nervous, too aware. I told myself I was imagining things, that my mind was tired from the week. But the way their eyes met, and quickly darted away, it stirred something low and cold in my chest. When I brought out dessert, my caramel tart, still warm and glistening, everything seemed to slow down. I set the plate in front of Sophie, and Mark reached out to help. Their hands brushed just barely, but long enough for me to feel my stomach tighten. They froze. I saw it. Ethan didn't. And in that tiny silence, a voice deep inside whispered what I didn't want to believe. Something was wrong. Ethan laughed, completely unaware, and raised his glass. "You two look like you've seen a ghost," he teased, his voice slicing through the tension like a dull knife. Mark let out a laugh that didn't sound like his, too quick, too forced. "Just burned my hand on the plate," he said, waving it off. But I heard it, that tiny tremor in his tone. And as he rubbed his palm, I smiled and said, "You should be more careful. Sunburns leave scars." It came out soft, even playful, but my eyes lingered longer than they should have, on both of them. The room filled again with small talk and laughter, but I wasn't in it anymore. I kept replaying that brush of hands, the stiff smiles, the flicker of guilt that passed between them like a secret signal. Every word Sophie spoke sounded too polished. Every time Mark refilled her glass, I watched the angle of his hand, the softness in his expression. To anyone else, we looked like the perfect family. To me, we looked like a painting starting to crack. Later, as everyone said their goodnights, Mark kissed my cheek, light, distracted. Sophie hugged me, her perfume sweet and overwhelming, lingering on my skin even after they left. When the door finally closed, I just stood there in the silence of my kitchen, staring at the empty plates and the half-drunk glasses of wine. Something inside me, that old, quiet part women learn to listen to, whispered that the night wasn't over. That night, I couldn't sleep. Mark's soft breathing beside me felt almost rehearsed, too even, too calm, while my own thoughts thrashed like waves. I stared at the ceiling, tracing cracks I'd never noticed before, wondering if they'd always been there or if I was just now learning how to see. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that look between them, the hesitation, the recognition. It wasn't imagination anymore. It was memory replaying itself, daring me to deny it. I thought about how love turns quiet before it dies, how laughter becomes polite, how touches lose warmth. I remembered when Mark used to notice everything, the way I curled my hair, the songs I hummed while cooking, even the shade of lipstick that made him say, "That's my favorite." Now he barely looked at me when I spoke. Maybe that's how betrayal begins, not with lies, but with silence. By morning, I'd convinced myself to let it go, at least for now. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was tired. Maybe Sophie's laughter just sounded louder because I was listening too closely. But as I brewed my coffee, that same instinct, that deep, heavy knowing only women seem to carry, settled in my chest. Something had shifted, and I knew it was only a matter of time before the truth found its way to the surface. A week later, it happened so casually that it almost felt like fate. Mark had left his tablet on the kitchen counter, screen still glowing. I only meant to pay a bill, something ordinary, harmless, but then a small notification slid across the top. "Sophie, I missed last night. I keep thinking about your hands. For a second, I couldn't even breathe. The room went still, the hum of the refrigerator fading into silence. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it echoing in my ears. I stared at the words, reread them, then reread them again, hoping somehow they'd rearrange into something innocent. But they didn't. My fingers trembled as I opened the messages, only to find gaps, deleted texts, missing threads. He'd tried to clean it up, but not well enough. The chat history was gone, but the timestamps told their own story. And then, buried in a hidden folder, I found the receipts. Hotel reservations, the same one repeated, same nights, same name, Mark's. I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, something cold and clear settled over me, sharper than pain. It wasn't disbelief. It was recognition. That voice inside me, the one that whispered through the cracks at dinner, was right all along. I closed the tablet slowly, like sealing a secret inside a box. For the first time in our marriage, I didn't feel like a wife. I felt like a detective waiting for a confession I already had. When Mark came home that night, everything in me wanted to explode. But I didn't. I played my part, the calm wife, the one who asks about his day while her world quietly catches fire. He dropped his keys in the bowl, kissed my forehead, and said, "Long day. Same old meetings, nothing special." His voice was casual, practiced, like he'd rehearsed it on the drive home. I set dinner on the table, the tablet hidden just inches away. "So," I said, keeping my tone even, "how was work today?" "Same as always," he repeated, reaching for his glass. I slid the tablet toward him, my eyes locked on his. "Interesting," I said softly, because according to Sophie, last night was special enough to miss. The color drained from his face. His fork slipped, clattering against the plate. "Hannah, Don't," I cut him off. "Just don't. You've already shared enough lies for both of us." My voice didn't shake. It was steady, almost too steady. I watched him stumble through excuses. It was a mistake. It just happened. I didn't mean for it to go that far. Every word was a different shape of cowardice. And through it all, I stayed silent, listening like a stranger studying a criminal's confession. When he finally ran out of excuses, the silence between us was almost merciful. I could hear the hum of the fridge again, the faint ticking of the clock above the stove and beneath it all. The sound of my own heartbeat, slow and deliberate. I wasn't crying. I wasn't shouting. I was just done. "You didn't just betray me," I said quietly, looking straight into his eyes. "You betrayed your brother. And you think I'll let that go?" His lips parted, but nothing came out. That was the moment he realized my calm wasn't forgiveness. It was strategy. He tried to reach for my hand, but I pulled it away. His touch suddenly felt foreign, like being brushed by someone I used to know. "Hannah, please," he said, his voice cracking. "It didn't mean anything." I almost laughed, that same hollow laugh people give at funerals when they don't know what else to do. "Oh, it meant something," I said. "Just not what you think." That night, he slept on the couch. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling again, but this time there were no cracks, just a mirror of everything I'd been blind to. I didn't know what my plan was yet, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to be the woman who simply got cheated on. I was going to be the woman who made them both regret it. I didn't tell Ethan right away. What good would it do to hurl another bomb into an already broken family? No, I needed time, precision, control. So I smiled through the following week as if nothing had happened. I cooked dinner, folded laundry, answered Mark's empty apologies with silence. He thought I was softening. He mistook my quiet for forgiveness, when in truth I was building the stage where they'd destroy themselves. 2 weeks later, I invited them all for another dinner. The same group, same table, same wine. Mark hesitated, of course. "So soon?" he asked, his voice small, like a boy expecting punishment. "It's just dinner," I said, smiling. "Family should stick together." He wanted to believe me so badly. I could see it in his eyes. Sophie accepted the invitation without missing a beat, probably thinking I was naive enough to play hostess again. Perfect. The night arrived like déjà vu, the laughter, the wine, the same golden light spilling across the tablecloth. But this time, I wasn't part of the scene. I was the director, quietly framing every moment. My phone rested on the counter, camera on, recording everything. Every glance, every nervous smile, every tremor of guilt that crossed their faces. I wasn't searching for proof anymore. I was crafting evidence. The evening unfolded like a performance I'd seen before, every line rehearsed. Mark poured Sophie's wine first. Again. Ethan laughed too loudly at his own jokes. And I smiled, my heart steady, my voice smooth. They thought I'd forgotten, that I'd chosen peace over truth. But peace is for the innocent. I was done pretending. When dessert came, I cleared the plates, letting my hand slip. My phone landed on the table, screen glowing. The photo I'd been saving as my lock screen, Mark and Sophie, kissing in a hotel hallway. For a split second, no one breathed. Ethan's fork froze midair. His smile collapsed. What is that? He asked, staring at the screen. I turned to him, voice soft, almost kind. Oh, that? That's from last week. Your wife and my husband were a little busy while you were out of town. The silence that followed was heavy, electric, the kind that breaks people before words even do. Sophie's face drained of color. Hannah, please, she started. I tilted my head. Please what? Don't show your husband what you've been doing with mine? Mark tried to speak, but I raised a hand. Don't bother, I said. You already tried explaining, in my kitchen, and you weren't very convincing then either. It was Ethan's turn to stand, his voice shaking with fury. The perfect dinner shattered right there, with the sound of a man realizing his wife was a stranger. The room erupted into chaos, voices overlapping, chairs scraping, Ethan shouting Sophie's name like it might still mean something. Mark tried to follow me as I stepped back, his face pale, desperate, words tumbling out faster than sense could catch them. Hannah, please, let me explain. But I was done giving him that privilege. Explain what? I said, my voice steady. That you destroyed your marriage and your brothers in one move? That's quite an accomplishment, really. I picked up my phone, wiped a non-existent smudge from the screen, and slipped it into my purse. I didn't need to stay and watch them unravel. I'd already seen enough. I turned to Ethan one last time, and in that moment, our eyes met. His pain mirrored mine so clearly that I almost pitied him. Almost. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, I said quietly. But you deserved the truth. We both did. Then I walked out, leaving behind a table that still smelled of wine, betrayal, and expensive perfume. As I closed the door behind me, the night air hit my face, cool, sharp, cleansing. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe. My hands were steady, my pulse calm. I didn't feel victorious. I felt awake. They thought the truth would end me, but they underestimated something vital. Women like me don't break. We sharpen. And that night I realized my revenge had only just begun. In the days that followed, everything collapsed exactly as I knew it would. Ethan filed for divorce within a week. Sophie moved out, her designer luggage stacked on the curb like discarded trophies. Mark's voice filled our house again, but this time only through voicemails. Shaky, desperate things that I couldn't bring myself to delete, though I never listened to them twice. Hannah, please. I made the biggest mistake of my life. I love you, not her. Please call me. His words bled through the speaker like apologies too late to matter. At work, people noticed the flowers he kept sending. Too many, too loud, all wrong. They didn't smell like remorse. They smelled like guilt dressed up as love. I stopped taking the elevator just to avoid seeing them wilt in the lobby every day. Funny how men think grand gestures can erase the very things that shattered you. They never realize that silence speaks louder than any bouquet ever could. When I finally ran into Ethan again, it wasn't planned. We just happened to choose the same cafe, on the same gray afternoon. He looked thinner, older somehow, the kind of tired you can't fix with sleep. When he saw me, he managed a small, sad smile and said, "You didn't deserve that." And I surprised myself by answering, "Neither did you." Two people bound not by love, but by the wreckage of it. We sat by the window, the rain outside smudging the world into soft gray streaks. Neither of us rushed to speak. There was comfort in the silence, the kind that only exists between two people who've lost the same thing. Finally, Ethan exhaled, a bitter laugh escaping him. "Guess we both married liars," he said, stirring his coffee without looking up. I nodded, the corner of my mouth lifting just slightly. "Maybe," I replied, "but I'm done being one of their victims." He looked at me then. Really looked, not with pity, but with something deeper, like recognition. "You seem stronger than I expected," he said quietly. I smiled at that because he was right. "I had to be," I answered. "Strength isn't something you find, it's what's left when everything else is gone." He chuckled under his breath, shaking his head as if he understood exactly what that meant. When our coffees were gone, we didn't make promises or share contact information. We didn't need to. There was an unspoken understanding between us that healing doesn't always mean closure, and revenge isn't just about payback. It's about reclaiming the part of yourself someone tried to erase. As I watched Ethan walk away into the rain, I felt something new settling inside me. Not peace, not yet, but purpose. After that afternoon with Ethan, something in me shifted. I stopped replaying the betrayal and started studying it. Every memory, every lie, every excuse. I dissected them like a map of their arrogance. Mark still tried to reach me, his calls turning from apologetic to pleading, then finally to angry silence. That silence was what I'd been waiting for. It meant he'd stopped believing he had control. And that was when I knew I finally did. I spent my evenings in the quiet hum of my office, going through files from our company. Mark and I had built it together, at least on paper. But as I combed through receipts and transactions, patterns began to appear. Hotel charges disguised as client meetings, dinners labeled team expenses. I highlighted each one with care, page after page, the highlighter gliding like a blade. Betrayal might break your heart, but it sharpens your focus. By the time I closed the last folder, my pulse was calm, my mind crystal clear. I wasn't seeking closure anymore. I was preparing a reckoning. I wasn't going to scream or beg or throw things like women do in bad movies. My revenge would come in paperwork, signatures, and silence. Because sometimes the most devastating revenge isn't destruction, it's exposure. The plan came together quietly, almost beautifully. There was no dramatic moment, no shouting or tears, just the steady rhythm of strategy. I gathered every document, every receipt, every careless charge Mark and Sophie had left behind. Dinners, hotel stays, even the gift purchases he'd claimed as business expenses, all of it, funded by the company card. Their affair wasn't just personal betrayal anymore, it was corporate fraud. And that meant justice could wear more than one face. I packaged everything neatly in a folder, color-coded, chronological, impossible to refute. Then I sent it straight to Ethan's lawyer with a simple note. "You'll want to see this." I imagined the expression on Mark's face when he realized his downfall didn't come from shouting or confrontation, but from his own arrogance. There's something satisfying about letting a man destroy himself with his own hands. When Ethan called me afterward, his voice was calm, almost cold. "You just handed me the win," he said. "You didn't have to." "I know," I replied, "but I wanted to." And I meant it. It wasn't about revenge against Sophie anymore. It was about restoring balance, about proving that women like me don't just survive. We rebuild the battlefield in our favor. It didn't take long for the fallout to reach him. The company board called an emergency meeting. Ethan's lawyer filed an amendment that changed everything. Within days, Mark's partnership was suspended, his reputation shredded beyond repair. And then came the final act, his knock on my door, When I opened it, he looked nothing like the man I'd married. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, his voice stripped of charm. "You destroyed me," he said, his words trembling somewhere between accusation and disbelief. I leaned against the doorway, unbothered. "No, Mark," I said quietly. "I exposed you. There's a difference." He ran a hand through his hair, desperation spilling out of him like sweat. "We could have fixed it, Hannah. We could have started over." I almost pitied him. Almost. "You're right," I said, tilting my head. "You and your brother can fix it now, over your shared ex-wife." His face collapsed under the weight of it, that one cruel truth he could never spin into a lie. He tried to speak again, but I closed the door gently, leaving his words unfinished. For the first time since it all began, I felt light. Not triumphant, not cruel, just free. It wasn't the satisfaction of revenge that moved through me. It was the relief of ending something rotten. And as his footsteps faded down the hall, I realized he hadn't just lost his marriage or his career. He'd lost the only person who ever truly saw him. After Mark's footsteps disappeared, the house felt different, lighter, quieter, almost sacred. I walked through each room slowly, noticing the small ghosts he'd left behind. His mug on the counter, a shirt folded wrong, the faint trace of his cologne clinging to the hallway. But instead of ache, I felt gratitude. Every reminder was proof that I'd survived him. I wasn't the same woman who'd once believed loyalty could save love. Now I knew. Truth saves you, not devotion. In the weeks that followed, I started sleeping again. The nightmares stopped, replaced by plans. My lawyer finalized the separation, and I moved forward with something that had been waiting in me all along, my dream of opening a small catering business. Food had always been the language I used to love people, and now it would be the language I used to love myself. Ethan offered to help with the startup, and for once I said yes without guilt. It was strange how healing looked nothing like I'd imagined. It didn't come in apologies or closure. It came in quiet mornings, warm bread, and clean slates. My revenge was never about destroying Mark. It was about reclaiming me. And as I signed the final papers and handed the keys to my new kitchen, I realized something simple and powerful. He had chosen betrayal, but I had chosen evolution. Months later, the air in my new cafe smelled of butter, espresso, and second chances. The grand opening had drawn a small crowd, neighbors, friends, even a few curious strangers who'd followed the smell of fresh pastries down the street. I stood behind the counter, apron tied neatly, hands dusted with flour, feeling something I hadn't in a long time. Peace. No lies, no hidden glances, no pretending. Just me, my name on the sign, my recipes on the menu, and my heart finally somewhere safe. When Ethan walked in, the chatter softened. He carried a bouquet, nothing extravagant, just wildflowers wrapped in brown paper. "You did it," he said, that gentle smile of his still carrying a trace of sadness. "You turned all that pain into something beautiful." I took the flowers, my fingers brushing his for just a second. "That's what women do," I told him, smiling. "We rebuild, we rise." And I meant it, every word. I poured him a glass of wine, the same brand from that first dinner, the one that had started it all. The cork popped softly, almost like a sigh of closure. We sat together in the corner booth, not as victims, not even as survivors, just two people who had made it through the fire and learned how to breathe again. The cafe glowed in the evening light, the windows catching streaks of gold from the setting sun. Ethan sat across from me, looking around as if trying to memorize every corner. The worn wood tables, the laughter from the kitchen, the scent of cinnamon in the air. "You really built something special," he said softly. "I just helped you lift a few boxes." I smiled, shaking my head. "You did more than that. You reminded me what strength looks like when it's quiet." He raised his glass, the deep red of the wine catching the light. "To survival," he said. I met his gaze, holding it for a moment that felt heavier than words. "To rebirth," I replied. Then I lifted my own glass, the rim trembling just slightly in my hand. "And to family," I added, my voice low but steady. The kind that doesn't destroy you. Our glasses met with a soft clink, not the sound of celebration, but of peace. As we drank, I felt the last weight of the past slide from my shoulders. The pain, the betrayal, the rage, all of it had become something else entirely. Lessons, maybe. Warnings. Or perhaps the quiet proof that even from ruin, something pure can still grow. After Ethan left, I stayed a while, cleaning the last table myself, humming softly to the faint music playing through the speakers. The night outside was still, the kind that makes the world feel suspended in time. Through the cafe window, I could see my reflection, older, wiser, softer in some ways, stronger in others. I wasn't the woman who'd once mistaken loyalty for love. I was someone new, someone I'd chosen to become. I poured myself one last glass of wine and stood by the window, watching the streetlights flicker. Every reflection in the glass told a story, of pain that became purpose, of endings that disguised beginnings. Somewhere, I knew Mark was still unraveling, still trying to rebuild from the ashes he created. But his story was no longer mine to carry. I'd already written my ending. Or maybe, my beginning. I lifted the glass slowly, whispering the words that had lived in my chest for months. He chose betrayal. I chose evolution. And that was my real revenge. The wine caught the light like a flame before I took a sip, the taste rich and full, like freedom.